Hopewell culture created complex trade networks and burial mounds in the Midwest. Chapter 1. A Whisper in the Forest. The first clues of a lost civilization. Let's take a deep breath. And now, imagine a quiet forest. The wind barely rustles the leaves. You're walking along a narrow path, somewhere in Ohio. The morning mist clings to the grass. The birds haven't even finished their coffee yet. Everything is still, calm, peaceful, but then you see it, a small hill. Oddly round, out of place. You squint. Is it just a bump in the earth? A regular hill? Or maybe something more? That is exactly how some early settlers felt when they stumbled upon the first mounds built by a people long gone. These weren't just hills. These were handcrafted, shaped by human hands. Some were tall, some were wide. Some were perfect circles or long winding shapes like animals, and under many of them were treasures. No, not gold, not pirate stuff. We're talking about copper shaped into birds, stones carved into animals, sparkly mica from far-off mountains, and sometimes human remains carefully buried, sometimes with tools or jewelry, as if being prepared for a journey to somewhere else. That was the beginning of the story of what we now call the Hopewell culture. Now, to be clear, Hopewell wasn't their name. It's not what they called themselves. That name came much, much later thanks to a guy named Mordecai Hopewell. He owned a farm in Ohio in the 1800s where one of the mound sites was found. Lucky guy got a whole ancient civilization named after him just because he owned the land. Imagine someone finding an ancient temple in your backyard and calling it the Dave culture. Anyway, back to the forest. The Hopewell people lived about 2,000 years ago, long before highways, smartphones, or even pizza. They didn't have metal tools or horses or writing, but what they did have was incredible creativity, deep spirituality, and a knack for building things that still leave scientists scratching their heads. What's amazing is how they built their mounds with just baskets, sticks, and teamwork. They moved dirt tons of it one handful at a time, carefully, with purpose. Some mounds were used to bury important people. Others were made for ceremonies, maybe even skywatching. No one's 100% sure yet, but we do know they didn't build these just for fun. Early European settlers were confused when they saw these mounds. Some thought they were Viking forts. Others claimed they were made by ancient Egyptians or people from Atlantis. Everyone had wild theories except the most obvious one, that Native American ancestors made them. It wasn't until much later that archaeologists started to put the pieces together. They found patterns. Similar mound shapes, objects buried deep inside, and signs of a big trade network that stretched across what is now the United States. But let's go back again. Picture the forest floor, quiet. There's a deer nearby chewing grass like it's got all the time in the world. Birds flit between branches. And under the soil, hidden for centuries, are the remains of a powerful story. This land, now flat and green, was once full of activity. People gathering, singing, trading, praying, living their lives like we do now, laughing, crying, worrying about the weather. Their homes may be gone, their names forgotten, but the earth remembers. You can still visit some of these mounds today. In Ohio, places like Mound City and Newark earthworks have been preserved. You can walk around them, feel the wind, and imagine what once was. The land itself feels quiet, but not empty. It's like standing in a giant museum, where the walls are made of sky and soil. Some mounds are shaped like animals. The famous Serpent Mound, a long, winding earthwork that looks like a massive snake, is nearby. We'll talk more about that one later. But for now, just know that the Hopewell were doing something big, something that stretched beyond their lifetimes. Maybe they believed the mounds would help their souls rise to the stars. Maybe they just really like snakes. Who knows? One thing's for sure, they weren't just sitting around, they were building, planning, remembering. And somehow, over hundreds of years, their story faded. The forest grew back, the rivers shifted, the people moved on. But their legacy stayed, tucked quietly under the trees, waiting for someone to notice again. And when we finally did, when scientists and explorers and everyday hikers started to dig a little deeper, we began to hear the whisper of the Hopewell people once more. A whisper that says, "We were here, we mattered." and we left something behind. So as you lay back, eyes closing, just picture it, a line of people, basket after basket, building a mound in the soft golden light of evening. A child watching the stars as the ceremony begins, a gentle flute echoing through the forest. The sound of feet on packed earth, voices low, respectful. A people connected to the land, the sky, and each other. You don't need to remember every date or detail. Just let the feeling stay with you, the peace, the mystery, the quiet awe. Because this story isn't just history. It's a bedtime story from the earth itself. So sleep easy tonight, friend. The Hopewell were here, and their story is just beginning. Chapter 2. Who were the Hopewell? A civilization without a name. You're still lying there, cozy and warm. Outside your window, maybe there's a breeze or the soft hum of night. And in your mind, we're back in the forest, walking beside ancient earthworks built by a people we're only just starting to understand. Now, we call them the Hopewell, but let's be honest. That name doesn't really belong to them. It came from one guy's farm in the 1800s, Mr. Mordecai Hopewell. Nice enough name, rolls off the tongue. But the people who actually lived and breathed in this land 2,000 years ago, they didn't call themselves Hopewell. We don't actually know what they called themselves. No written records. No stone tablets or hidden cave scrolls. Not even a giant wooden sign that says, "Welcome to Hopewellville." So who were they? Well, to start, they weren't a single tribe. They weren't an empire. They didn't have a king sitting on a throne made of corn. The Hopewell culture was more like a group of communities spread out across the American Midwest and beyond, mostly in Ohio, but also stretching into Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, and even into New York and Florida. They didn't live in giant cities, but rather in villages near rivers and streams. They weren't building castles or conquering lands. Instead, they were trading, crafting, and building mounds with meanings we're still trying to decode. It's like they were all part of a giant conversation sharing ideas, rituals, and goods without ever needing Twitter. Imagine it. People living miles apart in different regions, somehow building similar mounds, making similar jewelry, and practicing similar spiritual ceremonies. No one knows exactly how they stayed connected. There weren't roads or maps, just rivers, trails, and word of mouth. But still, they did it. Somehow, across hundreds of miles, they created a cultural vibe, if you will, that tied them together. It's kind of beautiful. So what did a day in the life of a Hopewell person look like? Well, picture a small village near a slow-moving river. The air is warm. You can hear insects buzzing lazily in the background. People are gathered near a fire, roasting fish or maybe cooking squash and seeds. Children are chasing each other barefoot through the grass, laughing. Nearby, someone is carefully shaping a piece of copper into a tiny animal. Another person smoothing clay into a pot. They weren't warriors. At least, not in the way we usually imagine. Most of the evidence we have suggests that Hopewell life was peaceful. Their mounds and artifacts don't show scenes of battle or bloodshed. Instead, they show animals, symbols, and spiritual figures. You don't find swords. You find pipes shaped like owls and stone tools designed for ceremony, not combat. This wasn't a warrior society. It was more like a spiritual artist commune, with really good trade connections. And speaking of trade, these people had range. Hopewell folks weren't just crafting pretty things for themselves. They were part of a huge network. We're talking obsidian from Yellowstone, shark teeth from the Atlantic coast, copper from the Great Lakes, mica from the Appalachian Mountains. And these items weren't just souvenirs, they were carefully shaped into jewelry, tools, and sacred objects. It's like they had an ancient version of Etsy. One carved bear-tooth necklace shipped from Florida. Thanks for supporting small spiritual businesses. But seriously, the level of communication and movement it would have taken is stunning. Remember, no wagons. No GPS, just people walking or paddling down rivers, bringing news, gifts, and ideas from village to village. Now let's talk about what they left behind. If you could travel back in time and walk through a Hopewell site, it wouldn't feel like a city. There wouldn't be stone buildings or massive temples. What you'd see are earthworks' huge shapes carved into the landscape. Some were used for burials, Some were ceremonial spaces, some were aligned with the moon or stars. These mounds took years, even decades, to build. They weren't just dumping piles of dirt randomly. These folks had plans, geometry, alignment. They knew the land, they knew the sky, and they built with meaning. And when someone passed away, especially an important figure, they weren't just buried and forgotten. The Hopewell made it special. They held ceremonies. They placed offerings beside the body tools, ornaments, pipes, and symbols. Sometimes dozens of people were buried in the same mound, like a shared resting place that told a story about who they were and what they believed. There's a quiet wisdom in that. You know, it's easy to think that ancient means primitive, but the Hopewell weren't primitive. They were just living differently, in tune with nature, focused on connection, both with people and with something larger, the stars, the land, and whatever lay beyond death. They didn't need skyscrapers. They built memory into the ground itself. And that's why they still speak to us. Not with words, but with shapes, with paths, with the quiet hum of earthworks that stretch across fields and forests. Their story isn't loud. It's not flashy, it's slow, steady, and deeply human. So next time you see a hill that looks a little too round, or a bend in a river that feels just right, pause, breathe. You might be walking where the Hopewell once danced, or prayed, or told stories to their children under the same stars you see tonight. They may not have left behind books or statues, but they left behind something even more mysterious, a feeling, a sense of wonder, a connection that hums through the soil if you're quiet enough to listen. And so, as you drift towards sleep tonight, just know this. The Hopewell were here. We may not know their names, but we know their spirit, and that spirit still walks the woods, still watches the skies, and still whispers through the mounds. Chapter 3. The land they loved, rivers, forests, and fertile soil. Let's go for a walk, a slow one, no rush. Just you, me, and the land beneath our feet. We're heading back again 2,000 years into the past. But this time, instead of starting with mounds or artifacts, let's take a closer look at the land itself. Because before the Hopewell could build anything, before they could trade, carve, or dream, they had to live. And the land they chose to live on, honestly, pretty dreamy. Picture this: rolling hills, wide open skies, thick forests that go on forever. Rivers winding through the trees like silver snakes. Wildflowers blooming in every open space. Birds chirping like they've got gossip to spill. And somewhere off in the distance, the steady sound of flowing water, humming like a lullaby. This is the Ohio River Valley, the heartland of Hopewell life. It wasn't just beautiful, it was generous. The forests were full of deer, turkey, squirrels, and rabbits. The rivers held fish, mussels, and turtles. If you knew what to look for, the plants could feed you, heal you, and even help you see visions. This land didn't just support the Hopewell people. It shaped them. They built their homes near rivers where the water was calm and shallow. They used what nature gave them: wood, clay, stone, and tall grass. No metal tools, no sawmills, no power drills. Just sharp stones, strong hands, and probably a lot of patience. Their homes were small, round, or rectangular, built low to the ground, cozy and simple. Think quiet huts with thatched roofs, a little smoke rising from the center, and someone humming while they stir a pot over the fire. The kind of place where you'd feel safe, even on a rainy night. And around the homes, gardens. Carefully tended patches of earth growing goosefoot, knotweed, sunflower, and squash. These were some of the earliest farmers in North America. They didn't grow massive fields of corn yet, that would come later, but they worked with what they had. They also gathered wild berries, nuts, and seeds. Hazelnuts, acorns, blackberries, the kind of snacks that make you feel like you're on a nature hike, even if it's just lunchtime. Let's talk about rivers again. Because our rivers were everything. They were roads. They were grocery stores. They were calendars, storytellers, and spiritual guides. The Hopewell traveled by canoe quietly gliding across water that reflected the sky. No traffic, no potholes. Just smooth sailing, surrounded by green. Rivers connected them to other people. Trade goods floated along these watery highways: shiny shells, carved pipes, copper shaped into animals, But rivers weren't just for trade. They were sacred, alive. The Hopewell believed the world had layers like a giant sandwich made of earth, water, and sky. Rivers were the pathways between those layers. Maybe even doorways to the spirit world. Imagine a quiet ceremony at sunset. A group of people standing by the riverbank, placing offerings in the water stones, feathers, little bundles of herbs. A soft chant rising into the air. A canoe drifting slowly away, carrying someone's memory, someone's dream. That's the kind of connection they had with the land. It wasn't just a place to live, it was a partner, a teacher, a mystery. Now, the Midwest today doesn't always get the praise it deserves. People hear Ohio and think of cornfields or football or maybe just more corn, but back then, it was prime real estate. Rich soil, endless forests, mild summers, predictable seasons. You didn't have to work yourself to the bone just to survive, which meant you had time for other things like art, ceremony, and, building enormous mounds shaped like snakes. And the seasons themselves, they were important. The Hopewell paid close attention to the rhythm of the year. Spring was for planting, summer for growing, fall for harvest, winter for rest and stories by the fire. Each season brought different colors, different smells. Yellow flowers in the spring, sweet smoke in the fall, cold, crisp air in winter that made the stars feel closer. They didn't just see the seasons, they lived inside them. Even the animals meant something. Deer weren't just food, they were symbols. So were bears, birds, and snakes. You'll find them carved into stone pipes, painted on pottery, or even buried inside the mounds. Every creature had a lesson, a power, a place in the great story of the world. And when they chose where to build their mounds, they didn't pick spots at random. They picked places with meaning, flat plains surrounded by forest, hills overlooking rivers, clearings where the moonlight touched just right. Their mounds were part of the land, not separate from it. So if you ever find yourself walking through Ohio or Illinois or Indiana and you stumble across a grassy hill that seems a little too perfect, take a moment. Stand still, listen. You might hear the rustle of trees the Hopewell once walked beneath. You might hear the slow splash of a canoe that hasn't passed in centuries. Or maybe, if the wind is just right, you'll hear a whisper from the earth. This land remembers. The Hopewell didn't build skyscrapers, they didn't invent machines. But they lived with the land, not just on it. They understood it, honored it, and left behind reminders, soft, green mounds that still rise from the ground like the gentle breaths of a sleeping world. So tonight, as your head sinks into the pillow, think of rivers, of trees stretching toward the sky, of warm soil and birdsong and stone paths by the water. The Hopewell lived there. And maybe, just maybe, their spirit still does. Chapter 4. Earth beneath their feet. The art of mound building tonight. We start with dirt. Not glamorous. Not shiny. Just plain, honest dirt. But if you were a member of the Hopewell culture, this dirt, the very earth beneath your feet, was more than just something to walk on. It was sacred. It was alive, and it could be shaped into something incredible. So let's talk about the mounds. To a sleepy hiker or curious deer, a Hopewell mound might just look like a gentle bump in the land, nothing too fancy. But step back, look again. Some are long, narrow ridges. Some are perfect circles. Some stretch across hundreds of feet, winding like giant animals. And when seen from above, some make shapes, serpents, birds, even geometric designs more accurate than you'd expect from a culture with no metal tools, no rulers, and no drones. How did they do it? Well, grab your imaginary woven basket. We're about to build a mound. No bulldozers, no cement mixers, just hands, buckets, and time. Lots of time. The Hopewell moved dirt one load at a time. Scooped it up with wooden tools or hands, dumped it into baskets, carried it across the site, and placed it just right. Then did it again and again and again. Think about that. Thousands of baskets, thousands of footsteps, maybe even generations of families adding layer upon layer. A child starts a mound. Their child continues it. Their grandchild finishes it. It wasn't about speed, it was about purpose. Now you might ask, why go through all that trouble? Good question. But remember, these weren't just piles of dirt, they were monuments. They meant something maybe to honor ancestors, to mark the stars, to tell stories without words. Let's zoom in on one kind of mound, the burial mound. These were carefully built over the remains of someone important, maybe a spiritual leader, a craftsperson, a beloved elder. Before placing the body inside, the Hopewell often built a wooden structure, first a sort of sacred cabin. The body would rest inside, along with items like pipes, jewelry, or carvings. Then they'd cover the structure with dirt. Not randomly, but layer by layer. Sometimes colored dirt, tread clay, black soil, even white ash. Think of it like painting with earth. The result? A smooth, rounded hill, sometimes just a few feet tall, sometimes as high as a 2-story house. And here's the wild part. They built these without writing anything down. No blueprints, no instructions. Just memory, tradition, and probably a lot of quiet teamwork. There's something beautiful about that. No loud machines. No rushing. Just people working together, maybe humming softly, children running nearby, elders watching the sun to check the mound's shape. It was a community effort. A spiritual act. A kind of art. Now, not all mounds were for burials. Some were platform mounds flat on top, maybe for ceremonies, dances, or gatherings under the stars. Others were arranged in complex geometric patterns. Picture giant squares, circles, and octagons, all laid out with almost perfect accuracy. The Newark earthworks in Ohio are a perfect example. They cover miles of land giant shapes built with mathematical precision. No GPS, no laser levels. Just knowledge passed down generation to generation, and it wasn't just about shapes. Some mounds were aligned with the moon, others with the sunrise at solstice. These weren't random piles. They were calendars carved into the land. The more we study them, the more we realize these folks knew what they were doing, but there's more to it than measurement. There's meaning. Imagine being a child in a Hopewell village. You walk by the mound every day. Your parents tell you stories about the people buried there or the spirits who watch over it. The mound becomes more than just a landmark. It's part of your identity. It tells you where you belong. And when someone dies, the whole community gathers. Not just to mourn, but to remember. To celebrate, they light fires, they sing, they bring gifts. Maybe someone smokes a ceremonial pipe carved into the shape of a bear. Maybe a flute plays softly as the sky darkens. Then together they add to the mound. It grows, bit by bit, carrying memories like seeds buried in the earth. And it keeps growing, long after the people who started it are gone. Some of these mounds have stood for 2,000 years, through rain, wind, snow, and time, through colonization, farming, and bulldozers, and still many remain. Why? Because they were built with care, with love, with patience. It's funny. In today's world, we build fast. We want instant results. But the Hopewell built slowly, deliberately. They weren't just building for themselves. They were building for the future, for people they'd never meet, for us. And that's a kind of hope that doesn't need a name. When early settlers stumbled upon these mounds in the 1800s, they didn't know what to make of them. Some thought giants built them. Others blamed ancient Egyptians. A few even said aliens. But the truth is quieter, simpler, and far more impressive. It was regular people, artists, farmers, spiritual leaders working together. No fancy machines, no secret technology. Just community, ritual, and respect for the land. So next time you see a mound, don't just walk by, stand still. Feel the earth beneath your feet. Imagine the hands that shaped it. The footsteps that wore down the path beside it. The stories whispered under moonlight as each basket of dirt was carried up the slope. And know this, the Hopewell are gone. But their mounds remain, soft hills in the grass. Memory made solid. The earth remembers. Chapter 5. Into the Mounds, Secrets of the Burials. Tonight, we take a step deeper, not just into history, but into the earth itself. We're standing at the base of a mound. The sun is setting behind the trees. The air smells like wildflowers and wood smoke. The mound is quiet, but not silent. If you could listen hard enough, you might hear something under the soil, not voices exactly, but stories, memories, because these mounds weren't just piles of dirt. They were burial places, final resting grounds, sacred homes for the dead. Now, don't worry, we're not going to get spooky. No jump scares. No skeletons popping up with dramatic music. This is a place of peace, respect, reflection. The kind of place where you lower your voice without even thinking about it. So let's go back in time again. A Hopewell village has just lost someone important. Maybe a leader. Maybe a healer. Maybe a beloved elder who told the best stories and always had snacks tucked in her pouch. The community gathers. Not in fear, but in honor. They don't rush. They prepare. First, a wooden structure is built almost like a small house. It's carefully placed inside a sacred area, sometimes surrounded by a low wall of earth. The body is laid inside, wrapped in fabric or bark, maybe with paint on the skin. Around it, they place offerings, things that mattered in life or that might help in the next world. What kind of things? Let's take a look. A carved stone pipe, shaped like a heron, its beak long and curved. A shell pendant from far away, still shining faintly. Thin sheets of mica, glittering like starlight. A pair of delicate bear claws tied with plant fibers, and beside it all, a small dish with traces of ochre, the red powder used for ceremonies and decoration. Each item says something. Tells a little part of the person's story, like tiny echoes. Then, slowly, the building is covered with earth. Layer after layer. People carry baskets of soil, maybe singing quietly as they walk. Some of the dirt is dark and rich, some red with clay. Others white with ash or sand. It's like painting the memory of a life, using colors from the ground itself. And when the mound is finished, it rises gently from the landscape, a quiet hill, a place to remember. But here's the amazing thing, that was just one person. Many mounds contain multiple burials, sometimes from different times, stacked carefully in layers like chapters in a book. Over years, even generations, more people are added, more objects, more stories. And every time the mound grows, a little taller, a little wider, a little wiser. Now, if you were to stand beside one of these mounds today like those at Mound City in Ohio, you'd see a whole field of them. Round, soft shapes spread across the grass like a constellation on land. Each one marking a life or many lives. A whole community remembered not in stone but in soil. Let's talk about what's been found inside. Archaeologists, those gentle diggers of stories, have uncovered some incredible things. Not treasure in the pirate movie sense, but treasure in the human sense. There are intricately carved pipes not just for smoking, but for ceremony. Some are shaped like animals, owls, wolves, deer. Others show human figures in poses we still don't fully understand. Ritual dancers? Maybe. Storytellers, messengers. There's obsidian volcanic glass that came all the way from the Rocky Mountains. Imagine how far it traveled, hand to hand, village to village, until it reached this quiet place to be buried beside someone important. There's copper, hammered into bracelets, headdresses, and breastplates. It shines even after centuries underground. Some say copper was like a spiritual mirror, helping the soul reflect light as it passed into the next world. And there's mica, a delicate mineral that flakes like paper and sparkles like frost. The Hopewell shaped it into hands, birds, and symbolic shapes. Try carving something that thin without breaking it? Go on, I'll wait. Pretty tricky, right? All of this tells us something. These people weren't just burying bodies. They were performing rituals, saying goodbye, preparing souls for a journey. Maybe they believed in an afterlife above the stars, or beneath the river, or right beside us in the wind. We may never know exactly what they believed, but the care they took, the time, the effort, it speaks louder than any written book. Now here's something beautiful. Even though these mounds are full of death, they don't feel dark. They feel peaceful. Like the soft closing of a story, a good story. One where the final chapter is written with love. And it's not just about individuals. These mounds show us how connected the Hopewell people were to each other, to the land, and to something bigger. Maybe the stars, maybe the spirits, maybe the mystery itself. And what's even more incredible, sometimes these mounds weren't buried and forgotten. They were returned to, visited, honored, paths led up to them, ceremonies were held nearby, fires lit, songs sung, as if the dead were still part of the community. Still listening, still present. That's something we don't see a lot today. In our world, cemeteries are quiet, distant places. But for the Hopewell, the line between the living and the dead, it was soft. Gentle, like a foggy riverbank where you can almost see someone standing just on the other side. So, as you drift off tonight, imagine this. A nighttime ceremony beside a mound, torches flicker. Someone plays a flute carved from bone. The stars are bright. The river murmurs nearby. And a small group of people friends, family, villagers, gather to tell stories about the one who's gone, about the lives they touched, about the journey that lies ahead. Because in the world of the Hopewell, death wasn't an ending. It was a return to the earth, a rising to the sky, a quiet, sacred step in the great circle of life. Chapter 6. Trails of Trade Networks Across a Continent. Let's imagine a single stone. It's smooth, black, sharp like glass, obsidian. It came from the Rocky Mountains. But it's resting now, buried deep in the soil of Ohio, thousands of miles away from where it was born, shaped by wind and lava and time. How did it get here? That's what we're going to talk about tonight. Because the Hopewell people weren't just mound builders. They were travelers, connectors, networkers. Long before social media and highways, they built something even more impressive, a continent-wide web of trade. Let's walk along one of those trails. It's early morning, mist hugs the ground. A group of travelers set off down a wooded path. They're carrying baskets, bundles, maybe even carved goods slung across their backs. Some walk, some paddle downriver in dugout canoes. There's no rush. They move with purpose and with stories. Now remember, there were no wheels. No horses, no written maps, just rivers, trails, and memory. And yet, these people traveled hundreds, even thousands of miles, trading goods, knowledge, and beliefs. How do we know? Because archaeologists have found stuff where it shouldn't be. Like that obsidian from the Yellowstone region, buried in a Hopewell mound in Ohio, or gleaming mica from the Appalachian Mountains, shaped into symbolic cutouts and placed with care. Or marine shells from the Gulf of Mexico, seashells that traveled more than 1,000 miles inland. Even the shark teeth found in Hopewell sites came from the Atlantic coast. And then there's copper, lots of it sourced from the Great Lakes, especially from places like Isle Royale in modern-day Michigan. That's far north. Yet Hopewell hands hammered and shaped it into tools, ornaments, and ceremonial gear. That's not local, that's continental. But here's what makes it really magical. It wasn't just about the things. It was about the connections. You see, the Hopewell didn't control a vast empire. They weren't demanding tribute like some ancient Bosi pants. They built these networks through respect, shared rituals, and relationships. They weren't just trading objects, they were trading ideas, beliefs, stories. Kind of like how you might swap snacks in school, but you also end up sharing jokes, learning new games, and maybe borrowing someone's favorite song. Let's say a trader arrives in a Hopewell village. They bring a carved shell pendant from the coast. It's passed from hand to hand. The village elders admire the design. A craftsperson studies the technique. A child listens to a tale about where the pendant came from, how the ocean breathes, how the waves speak in dreams. That pendant becomes more than decoration. It becomes a memory of somewhere else, a whisper from far away. And it's not a one-way trip. In return, the Hopewell might send out their own good stone pipes shaped like birds, pottery with intricate patterns, or pieces of cut mica, so thin and bright they almost look like starlight. And those objects travel through forests, across rivers, into distant villages where new hands and new eyes see them for the first time. Imagine the slow, steady rhythm of this movement. Not trucks, not planes, just people walking, talking, sharing, like ancient mail carriers, with better stories. Some scholars call it the Hopewell interaction sphere. A fancy name, but a simple idea. Different communities across North America, loosely connected, trading more than goods. They traded beliefs about the stars, life and death, symbols, rituals, ways of honoring ancestors. It's why you find similar mound shapes in different places, similar burial styles, similar carvings of animals, deer, bears, panthers. Like a giant cultural conversation happening across time and space without ever needing words on paper. Here's something else to think about. When you hold a Hopewell artifact, say, a small carved bear claw made from copper, it might have touched dozens of hands, each hand adding a little bit of story, a little bit of meaning. A traveler might carry it hundreds of miles. A spiritual leader might bless it. A child might hold it during a ceremony. By the time it's buried in a mound, it's not just a thing. It's a journey. And that's what makes this so powerful. The Hopewell weren't isolated villagers tucked away in quiet forests. They were part of something bigger. They looked beyond their own fields and saw a world full of connection. They knew the mountains, the rivers, the coastlines. And somehow, without machines or maps, they linked it all together. So what does this mean for us? Well, maybe it means that long before technology made it easy to talk across the world, people were already doing it in their own way, slowly, carefully, with intention. Maybe it means that even without the internet, humans have always wanted to connect, to share what they love, what they believe, what they've made with their hands. And maybe it reminds us that the things we carry, the small objects, the gifts, the stories, we pass them down, just like they did. So tonight, as your eyelids grow heavier, picture those ancient travelers. A canoe gliding through misty water, ripples trailing behind. A figure walking through tall grass, a bundle tied over their shoulder, humming an old song. Two strangers meeting at a clearing in the woods, swapping goods and maybe just maybe a laugh. They didn't build roads, but they built relationships. They didn't speak our language, but they understood something deeper, that across the land, across time, across silence, we're all just trying to share something true. And in that sharing we find connection. Chapter 7. Crafts of Peace. Hopewell Art and Spiritual Expression. Close your eyes. We're sitting in the shade of a tall oak tree. It's a warm afternoon. The air is filled with the smell of damp earth and crushed leaves. You hear the slow rhythm of work scraping, tapping, smoothing. Nearby, someone hums a tune older than memory. In front of you sits a Hopewell craftsperson. They're hunched over a piece of stone, carefully carving it into the shape of a bird, maybe a heron. Maybe something from a dream. Every motion is deliberate, not rushed. Every little detail matters, because this isn't just a tool. It's art, it's spirit. It's something bigger than what we call decoration. Tonight we're talking about Hopewell craftsmanship, their pipes, their carvings, and copperwork. The things they made not just to survive, but to express who they were, what they believed, what they felt. You see, while a lot of ancient cultures are known for weapons or fortresses, the Hopewell left us something softer, something quieter. They made beauty. Let's start with something unexpected. Pipes. To us, a pipe might just be a way to smoke. But to the Hopewell, pipes were sacred, ceremonial, deeply symbolic. They weren't just hollow tubes. They were carved sculptures. Imagine this, a pipe shaped like a panther crouching to leap, one shaped like a bird mid-flight, another shaped like a human figure with outstretched arms, maybe mid-dance. The detail is breathtaking. Even the feathers on the birds are etched in. You can almost hear them flutter. These weren't mass-produced. Each one was handmade, probably by someone who had a calm soul and a very steady hand. The pipes were used during rituals, possibly to send prayers skyward in smoke. And when they weren't being used, they were treasured, buried with care, tucked beside those heading off into the next world. Now, let's talk about pottery. Hopewell pottery wasn't flashy. It wasn't painted in wild colors or dripping in glaze. But it was elegant, earthy, practical, yes, but also thoughtful. Their pots were made from clay and sand, smoothed by hand and fired in open-air pits. Many were shaped into gentle, curves-rounded bowls, narrow-necked jars, and wide-mouthed vessels used to hold water, food, or maybe sacred herbs, and the designs, simple but powerful. Some pots had patterns pressed into the surface with cord, sticks, or fingernails, circles, spirals, dots, symbols we still don't fully understand, but that might have represented families, clans, or spiritual ideas. Then there's mica, that shimmering, flaky mineral we've mentioned before. The Hopewell loved it. And honestly, we get it. When the light hits it just right, it looks like the surface of water or starlight pressed into a sheet. They shaped mica into cutouts, hands, birds, claws, even human figures. These shapes were laid flat, probably used in rituals or worn during ceremonies. Some were buried inside mounds, resting near the dead like starlight tucked beneath the soil. Now for something bolder: copper. Copper isn't easy to work with, especially without modern tools, but the Hopewell were experts. They hammered it, smoothed it, even shaped it into thin sheets. Some of their copperwork was turned into bracelets, headdresses, and breastplates, glinting in the sun like warm fire. But copper wasn't just about looking cool. It had spiritual meaning too. It came from far away. It shined like the dawn. It was rare and treated with reverence. Imagine a leader stepping forward at a ceremony, copper circles dangling from their ears, sunlight bouncing off their chest. That shimmer wasn't just fashion. It was a signal: this person is important, this moment is sacred. And then there were the carvings: stone figurines, bone tools, animal shapes so finely detailed you can tell what kind of bird they're meant to be. But the carvings weren't just for show, they were stories. A bear-shaped pendant might represent strength. A bird might be a guide between the worlds. A claw could mean courage in the face of darkness. Each piece had a voice even if it never said a word, and that's what ties all of this together. The Hopewell didn't just make things to use. They made things to mean something. They believed in a world full of spirit, not just in people, but in animals, rivers, stars, even tools. Everything had a role. A place, a kind of silent wisdom, so a pipe wasn't just a pipe. It was a bridge. A bracelet wasn't just jewelry. It was identity. A piece of pottery wasn't just a bowl. It was a rhythm shaped by hand, held by fire, passed down through time. This attention to detail, this care, it speaks volumes. It tells us that the Hopewell were not just survivors. They were feelers, thinkers, artists of the everyday, spiritual engineers of the small and sacred. And unlike some other ancient cultures, they didn't leave giant stone statues or towering temples. They left intimacy, small, powerful pieces that say, "We were here. We saw beauty. We honored what we could not explain." So tonight, as your mind begins to drift and the world grows quiet, imagine a single Hopewell hand smoothing clay with a bit of river water. Imagine a group gathered around a fire, passing a carved pipe, eyes lifted to the stars. Picture a child holding a copper ornament, turning it in the light, watching it sparkle like magic. These are not forgotten people. They are remembered in every curve, every pattern, every patient, sacred touch. Sleep now, knowing that even long ago, humans were creating things not just to survive, but to feel, to understand, to share wonder. And maybe, just maybe, so are you? When you think of ancient civilizations, what comes to mind? Pyramids, jungles, mummies, maybe some cryptic hieroglyphs? Well, what if I told you there's a place in the heartland of America, in the flat, open lands of the Midwest, where an advanced Native American culture thrived? A culture so sophisticated they charted the cosmos and built monumental structures in its image. Sounds far-fetched, right? That's how people felt when they first discovered these sites. Today, the mounds of the Hopewell culture are protected as the Hopewell Ceremonial Earthworks, a UNESCO World Heritage Site. This vast complex spreads across 230,000 acres in what's now Ohio, encompassing over 40 individual sites. But who were the Hopewell people? When did they live? And how did they leave behind such a legacy? What they left behind is massive. The Hopewell built huge earthen mounds that cover parts of modern-day Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois. These mounds are more than just piles of dirt. They're carefully shaped, precisely oriented geometric wonders. Some are circular, others hexagonal or octagonal. Some are linear, stretching for hundreds of feet. They're large enough to fit several American football fields side by side. The Hopewell people created these shapes by hand without modern tools, using nothing but ropes, stakes, and an understanding of mathematics and astronomy that's frankly breathtaking. It gets even better. The Hopewell were masters of connecting these structures in a kind of celestial choreography. Some mounds are aligned with the cardinal directions. Others form a kind of map of the sky. Certain alignments only happen twice a year when the sun lines up just right. It's as if the Hopewell wanted to show us how deeply they understood the rhythms of the universe. And they weren't just making random shapes either. Their construction of these mounds is so precise that they align with key moments in the lunar cycle, including the lunar standstill, an 18.6-year cycle that affects ocean tides. This cycle causes the moon to appear stationary for a few days around its perigee or apogee, the closest and farthest points in its orbit around the Earth. The Hopewell recognized this phenomenon and incorporated it into their earthworks. And they didn't stop at the moon. The Hopewell also built mounds and enclosures aligned with the solstices and equinoxes. These are the longest and shortest days of the year, which occur when the Earth's axis is most or least tilted towards the Sun respectively. By aligning their structures with these celestial events, the Hopewell demonstrated a profound understanding of the Earth's position in the cosmos. Now you might be wondering, how did archaeologists make all these connections? It's not like they found a scroll that says, "Hey, check out this sweet solar alignment we got going on here." It's taken years of meticulous research, satellite imagery, and modern technology to piece together the astronomical alignments of these sites. And even still, much of it remains a mystery. The complexity and scale of these earthworks suggests a society far more advanced than many archaeologists expected. The sheer volume of labor required to construct these mounds indicates a highly organized society with a shared vision. After all, building these structures wasn't a one-time event. The Hopewell built new mounds and renovated old ones over several centuries. This required generations of people working together, sharing knowledge and skills. So let's rewind a bit and explore the timeline of this remarkable civilization. The story starts around 100 BC with the early Hopewell culture. During this period, the Hopewell lived in small villages and built small, low mounds, primarily for burial purposes. Around 100 AD, the Hopewell entered what archaeologists call the Mound Builder period. This era saw the construction of large platform mounds, often serving as bases for ceremonial structures. Some mounds were even used as burial sites for multiple individuals, suggesting a growing social hierarchy. By 500 AD, the Hopewell culture reached its zenith during the late Hopewell period. The monumental earthworks were constructed, showcasing their sophisticated understanding of astronomy and earthworks. Sadly, this cultural flowering didn't last. By 1000 AD, the Hopewell way of life was disrupted, likely due to climate change and resource depletion. The once thriving culture was scattered, absorbed into other tribes, and their earthworks were lost to the forest. The dramatic decline of the Hopewell raises questions about the resilience of such sophisticated cultures. How did they adapt to environmental changes? How did their knowledge survive through generations? And what caused the eventual demise of their civilization? Unfortunately, these questions may never have definitive answers. The Hopewell didn't leave behind written records or artifacts that could shed light on these issues. Instead, they left us with physical structures and a deep sense of wonder. The Hopewell civilization reminds us that complex societies can emerge in unexpected places and that sophisticated cultures aren't solely tied to geography or climate. They're shaped by human ingenuity, adaptation, and the quest to understand the world around us. As we continue to uncover the secrets of the Hopewell earthworks, one thing becomes clear. The people who crafted these structures weren't just observers of the sky. They were participants. They engaged with the universe, finding meaning in its cycles and patterns. They believed, quite literally, that the sky was talking to them. And if we listen closely, we can hear that conversation even today. The Hopewell earthworks stand as a testament to the power of human curiosity and the enduring quest to comprehend the cosmos. They demonstrate that long before modern instruments and theories, humans looked up at the sky and found a story worth telling. The question is, what story will you tell about the sky? Will you share the wonders you see and feel, or keep them to yourself? The choice, my friend, is yours. But remember, when you look up, you're not alone. The stars are watching too. And who knows what stories they might have to tell. For more insights on ancient civilizations, check out our videos on the mysteries of Easter Island and the secrets of Machu Picchu. And as always, thanks for tuning in. See you next time. Chapter 9. Sacred Gatherings, Ceremonies, Rituals, and Festivals. Tonight, we arrive at a celebration. Not one with flashing lights or loudspeakers, but one with firelight, flute music, and feet moving in rhythm with the earth, a Hopewell gathering. It's dusk. The sun has just slipped behind the trees, and a hush spreads over the land. Somewhere, a single drumbeat begins. Then another, a slow rhythm rises, like a heartbeat. You're standing near a large earthwork circle, maybe 200 feet wide. Inside it, people gather, forming a ring. Young, old, visitors, leaders, this is no ordinary night. Because for the Hopewell, ceremony was central to life. We don't have written records of their rituals. No instruction manuals. No surviving chants carved into stone, but what we do have. The places they left behind, the objects, and the quiet way the earth seems to hum where they once stood. From these clues, we begin to piece together something beautiful. The Hopewell didn't just live in the land. They honored it. And they honored each other through gatherings that blended celebration, mourning, astronomy, and spirituality. Let's step into one now. The air smells like sage and wood smoke. A slow procession moves toward the center of the circle. People wear woven garments, beads of copper, pendants carved from stone or shell. Some carry items wrapped in bark or cloth offerings for the fire or the ancestors. Someone steps forward, holding a ceremonial pipe carved in the shape of a hawk, not to smoke for fun, but as a sacred act. The smoke will carry prayers, maybe to the ancestors, maybe to the moon. Around the edge of the gathering, elders sit quietly, eyes closed, listening. Children peek out from behind their mothers. A young dancer steps into the circle, moving in slow, graceful arcs, feet tracing patterns worn into the earth. There is no stage, no spotlight. Everything happens in motion, in rhythm, in harmony with the world. These ceremonies weren't just for fun. They were how the Hopewell marked time, how they remembered the dead, how they welcomed new life, how they prepared for the unknown. Some gatherings were for seasonal change like the spring planting or the autumn harvest. Others were to mark solstices or lunar events, the times when the sky whispered something important. And some were for burial rituals, slow, respectful events where a mound would grow, layer by layer, as a final act of love. At these events, everyone had a role. The dancers, the singers, the storytellers who remembered what came before, the artisans who shaped special objects just for this moment, the spiritual leaders, maybe women, maybe men who guided the ceremonies, keeping things in balance. And always the community. The Hopewell believed that the individual was never alone, that life was lived together, and that even death wasn't a goodbye, just a return. A shifting of the wind. Now let's talk about the objects they used. We've mentioned them before, the carved pipes, mica cutouts, copper ornaments. But here, during a ritual, they come to life. Imagine someone holding a cutout of a bird-thin mica shining like moonlight. They raise it to the firelight. The shape reflects against a mound wall. It's not just pretty, it's symbolic. A bird might represent the soul ascending. A hand might symbolize a blessing. A spiral could be the never-ending path of life. These weren't props. They were tools of meaning. And when a ritual ended, many of these items were buried. Not because they were useless, but because their purpose had been fulfilled. Like lighting a candle, watching it flicker, and then gently blowing it out. The sacred didn't have to last forever. It just had to be felt. Now let's not forget the fun side. Because yes, the Hopewell had solemn ceremonies, but also festivals, feasts, and gatherings that were joyful. Food was shared corn, squash, berries, roasted game. Music echoed through the trees. People from different regions came together. Stories were swapped, songs sung in many dialects. Laughter and dancing under the stars. These were the social glue of Hopewell life. Imagine a child chasing fireflies while their parents talk trade with travelers from far away. A grandmother telling an old tale to a group of listeners as the moon rises behind her. Two strangers meeting and sharing a piece of copper jewelry, something carried for hundreds of miles. That's what these gatherings did. They connected people through memory, through joy, through ritual. And always, in the background, the earth watched, the mounds. The circles, the geometry of sacred space. The Hopewell built their ceremonial centers with care. You can feel it in the layout, the wide avenues leading into circles, the paths aligned with the moon, the open spaces made for gathering. These weren't just places, they were invitations to pause, to remember, to feel something sacred. So tonight as you rest, picture this: a soft summer evening, a fire crackling, the scent of roasted squash and wild mint in the air, a slow drumbeat echoing through the trees. And you, sitting among a group of people who believe that every moment could be sacred, if shared with intention. The stars turn overhead. Smoke rises. Someone begins to sing. And for a moment, there's no distance between you and the past, between breath and memory, between life and something more. Because that's what the Hopewell understood, something many of us forget, that ceremony is not just for the gods. It's for the people, for connection, for peace, for remembering what it means to belong to each other and to the great mystery we all share. Chapter 10. The Mystery of Disappearance. What happened to the Hopewell? They built great circles on the earth. They shaped copper into crescent moons and birds into pipes. They tracked the stars, honored the dead, and connected the continent with their footsteps, and then they were gone. No dramatic collapse. No massive war, no volcanic eruption. Just the Hopewell culture, after centuries of art, trade, and ceremony, began to fade around 400 AD slowly, quietly, like fog rolling back from a meadow. Tonight, we ask the question, what happened to them? But before we go looking for answers, here's a little bedtime spoiler. We might never know for sure, and maybe that's okay. Let's rewind a bit. At their height, the Hopewell culture spanned much of what is now the American Midwest and parts of the South. From the Mississippi River to the Atlantic coast, their influence stretched far and wide. They left behind miles of earthworks, thousands of artifacts, and a spiritual system woven into the land itself. And then, after about 400 AD, the construction of large ceremonial sites stopped. Trade networks dissolved. Mounds were no longer added to. The intricate art styles changed or vanished. Archaeologists noticed something strange. It wasn't a sudden end. It was more like the dimming of a candle, fewer big gatherings. Less long-distance trade, a shift in pottery styles, communities breaking up into smaller, more localized groups. And eventually, the great Hopewell centers, places like Newark and Mound City, were left behind. So what might have happened? Let's explore a few ideas, quietly, gently, with the same care the Hopewell gave to their mounds. Theory 1. Environmental change. The Midwest is known for its rivers, rich soils, and rolling hills. But even a small shift in climate can shake everything. Maybe the rivers changed course, flooding sacred sites or cutting off trade routes. Maybe weather patterns shifted, too much rain or not enough. That could have affected crops, hunting grounds, and the delicate balance of life. Imagine living in a place where the seasons suddenly feel unfamiliar, where the stars still rise but the ground beneath you begins to change. People might move, traditions might shift. Ceremonies might pause. Theory 2. Internal change. Cultures evolve. Beliefs change. Power structures shift. What was once important may begin to feel different. Maybe younger generations began questioning the rituals. Maybe new spiritual ideas emerged, ones that didn't rely on giant earthworks or cross-country trade. Smaller, more independent villages might have decided to go their own way. Focus on local concerns. Keep to themselves. Not out of rebellion, but out of practicality. Sometimes a culture doesn't fall. It simplifies. Theory 3. Population pressure. If there were too many people and not enough resources, conflict could have started. Not in the swords and fire way you see in movies, but in smaller ways. Disagreements over hunting grounds. Competition for farmland. Strained relationships with neighboring groups. Over time, this could fracture larger societies. The big ceremonial centers would fall out of use. People would scatter, looking for new homes, new ways. Theory 4. Merging with other cultures. The Hopewell might not have disappeared at all. They might have blended into other traditions, passing down their stories, symbols, and skills to the cultures that came after them. Many Native American groups today, especially in the Midwest and Southeast, may carry the legacy of the Hopewell in their oral traditions, art, and ceremonies. Even if the name Hopewell wasn't theirs to begin with, the spirit of the culture could still live on, not vanished, just transformed. It's strange, isn't it? We tend to expect drama when something ends. But maybe the Hopewell didn't need drama. Maybe they simply moved on. There's something peaceful about that. Not everything ends with a bang. Some things end with a choice, a shift in the wind, a slow walk away from the fire toward a new kind of life. And maybe we're the ones clinging to the question of what happened because we're afraid of endings that don't explain themselves. But the Hopewell may have understood something we forget, that life changes. That culture is like a river. It bends, flows, breaks off into smaller streams. That legacy isn't about how loud your ending is. It's about what you leave behind. And oh, did they ever leave something behind? Today, their mounds still rise in the grass. The circles still stretch across Ohio fields, aligned with the moon. Their pipes still rest in museum drawers, carved with the wings of birds. Their copper ornaments still glimmer, even after 2,000 years. Their ideas about community, about the cosmos, about memory still hum beneath the surface. So maybe the better question isn't, what happened to them? Maybe it's, what can we learn from how they lived and how they let go? Because they didn't cling, they didn't write manifestos or carve their fears in stone. They simply adapted. So tonight, as you sink deeper into sleep, picture this, the last big gathering at a Hopewell ceremonial site. Fires flicker. A group dances in a wide circle one last time. The stars are the same, but something in the air feels different. The pipes are packed away. The offerings buried. People hug, they share stories. Then they begin to drift, some down the river, some through the forest, some toward unknown futures. No one panics. No one protests. Because the culture they built, it doesn't live only in the mounds or the maps. It lives in the way they walked away, with grace, with intention, with the understanding that endings aren't always losses. Sometimes they're transitions. And that's a kind of wisdom that doesn't need a monument. Chapter 11. Echoes in the land, modern tribes, and Hopewell descendants, even after the last mound was built. Even after the traders stopped walking the long roads, the story didn't end. Because the Hopewell weren't just a culture frozen in time. They were people, real, breathing people, and people have children. They teach. They remember. They pass things down, not just tools, but stories, ceremonies, ways of being. So even though the name Hopewell comes from a 19th century farmer, Mr. Mordecai Hopewell, whose land happened to contain some important mounds, the people behind that name never truly vanished. They became part of other cultures. They merged, evolved, and continued. And tonight we'll walk with them. Not in the past, but in the present. Let's start with a simple truth. Many Native American tribes, today especially those from the Midwest and southeastern U.S., see the Hopewell not as strangers, but as ancestors. Tribes like the Shawnee, Miami, Adena, Potawatomi, and Ojibwe all have oral histories that connect to the mound builders. They speak of people who built with the earth, who honored the stars, who believed the land itself was alive. They don't call them Hopewell. That's our name, remember. But they remember the traditions, the symbols, and the feelings. Some stories talk of giant animals in the sky, of paths shaped like serpents, of star-born spirits who visited during ceremonies. These aren't bedtime stories, they're memories. Let's visit a modern tribal gathering. It's summer. The grass is warm. Families gather under tents, children run and laugh. But when the drums begin, a hush falls, a circle forms. Dancers in regalia step into the space. Feathers glint in the sun. Bells jingle softly with each movement. You watch as they spin, stamp, and glide. These are not Hopewell dances exactly, but they carry echoes. Echoes in the drum's heartbeat. Echoes in the use of circles and the rhythm of footsteps. Echoes in how the people move together not for show, but for connection. Afterward, an elder tells a story. It's about a bird who brought fire from the sky. Or maybe it's about a river that dreamed of flying. Or maybe it's not about anything literal at all, but about belonging. About listening, about being part of something bigger, And as you sit and listen, you feel it. The Hopewell aren't gone. They've just changed shape. Modern native leaders and communities have worked hard to reconnect with the ancient mound sites places like Mound City, Newark Earthworks, and Serpent Mound. In some cases, those lands were taken, disturbed, even built over, but things are changing. Today, more and more of these sacred places are being protected, respected, and visited by native communities who view them not as ruins, but as homes. For some, walking the mounds is like visiting grandparents' graves. For others, it's like entering a living library. And for many, it's a quiet kind of healing. Healing from centuries of loss. Healing from having traditions buried, languages silenced, and names miswritten. Archaeologists are learning to listen too. In the past, researchers often studied ancient cultures from a distance, collecting, measuring, labeling, but not always asking native people what they remember. Now, more scholars are working with tribes, not just about them. Because oral history matters. Because memory isn't always carved in stone, it's whispered at the dinner table. It's sung by grandmothers, it's danced barefoot in the grass. One tribal member said it beautifully, "The mounds don't need us to explain them. They need us to remember them." And so we do. Here's a story from Ohio. In recent years, tribal members from across the country gathered at a Hopewell site for a ceremony. Some came from Oklahoma, others from Michigan. Some had never been to Ohio before, but they brought drums, feathers, and stories that stretched back hundreds of years. They prayed in different languages, sang old songs. One elder knelt and placed her hand on the earth. "I feel them," she whispered. "They're still here." And it's not just native people reconnecting. More and more visitors, students, families, curious travelers are walking the ancient trails, not to solve the mystery, but to feel the presence. People are learning that the Hopewell weren't a puzzle to be cracked, but a people to be honored. That their art wasn't primitive, it was precise, intentional, spiritual. That the paths they built weren't just roads, they were relationships drawn across time and land. So tonight, as you drift deeper into sleep, think of the Hopewell not as lost, but as woven into everything, in the pattern of a bird's feathers, in the curve of a river, in the echo of a drum beat beneath a summer moon, in a grandmother's story told by firelight, in the hands of someone shaping clay, in the wind moving through a circle of tall grass. The Hopewell are still walking, still listening, still waiting for us to listen too. Hi, I'm here. I hope you're having a great summer wherever you are. Welcome back to the channel. We've been busy this month. We've had lots of videos out about pyramids, and I know some of you are disappointed we haven't gotten back to monsters yet. Don't worry, we will. We'll get back to them soon. But today is a special day because it's the day we finally releasing our video about the Hopewell. Now, if you remember from the last video, the Hopewell were a prehistoric society who lived in the Great Lakes region of North America. Their heyday was between 100 BC and 500 AD, and despite the fact that they weren't around for very long, they left behind some incredible structures. And it's their art that we're going to focus on today. Specifically, we're going to talk about their incredible earthworks. These are huge-scale projects, and you might be surprised to hear that they still exist. And I bet you've probably walked over one without even realizing it. Now, some of these works are truly massive. One of the largest sites, the Newark Earthworks, once covered more than 4 square miles. And while most of it has been lost to modern development, it still stands in parts, and some of the structures that do remain are truly magnificent. For instance, the octagon. This shape is 138 feet on each side. That's the size of a typical American football field. It has perfectly straight sides, and each corner is shaved off at an angle. It has been suggested that the builders of the octagon were using sighting methods that involved mirrors to make sure everything was level. And that's pretty advanced for a prehistoric people. But they didn't stop there. The Hopewell also dug a series of ditches and embankments that linked the octagon to other structures around the complex. Altogether, it forms a series of alignments that point to important celestial events. As modern archaeologists have discovered, the Hopewell could use these alignments to track the movements of the sun and the moon. and they could tell the time of year by which structure was in shadow. The complexity of these structures is truly astounding, and sadly, it's rare for such ancient sites to have survived to the present day. The reason many others haven't survived is because these mounds were seen as a threat to property values. In 1902, the editor of Scientific American said, quote, "Mounds and earthworks are unsightly, unsanitary, and often malarious excrescences upon the landscape that should be leveled." So, in order to build houses and farms, these mounds were bulldozed and flattened. Thankfully, though, some did survive, thanks in part to the efforts of Charles Fairbanks. He was the vice president under Teddy Roosevelt, and he helped set aside some of these structures as national monuments. So let's take a moment to appreciate the mounds that remain. They're wonderful examples of prehistoric engineering and astronomy. And no matter how hard people tried to cover them up or forget they were there, the Hopewell builders managed to leave their mark on the land. If you want to visit the Hopewell earthworks yourself, I recommend checking out the Hopewell Culture National Historical Park. They have several locations with hiking trails and visitor centers. And of course, don't forget to check online for updates and hours of operation. Now, if you've already visited, be sure to leave a comment telling us about your experience. And if you're planning on going, well, we wish you a pleasant trip. But speaking of surviving examples of prehistoric life, I should tell you about our latest project. If you love the ancient aliens theory, then you're gonna love this. Now, I know we normally stick to mythology, but sometimes there are topics that just need to be discussed. So this project gives us a chance to talk about archaeology, paleontology, and related topics. And I couldn't be more excited because one of my favorite things about mythology is how it relates to archaeology. Mythology helps us understand how ancient people viewed the world around them, and it gives us insight into the beliefs and practices of cultures long gone. So, if you're interested in that kind of thing, then you should definitely go check out this new project. We'll have a link to it in the description below. The Hopewell culture thrived during a time known as the Woodland period, which lasted from roughly 1000 BC to about 1600 AD. This era was characterized by the widespread adoption of agriculture and pottery by indigenous peoples east of the Mississippi River. Before the Woodland period, the indigenous societies in this area were primarily nomadic hunter-gatherers. However, with the introduction of agriculture, these societies were able to settle down and establish more permanent settlements. This allowed for the growth of larger populations and the development of more complex social structures. The Woodland period is also known for the introduction of the bow and arrow, which had a significant impact on the lives of the indigenous peoples. The bow and arrow allowed for more efficient hunting and defense, and it played a crucial role in the warfare and trade networks that developed during this period. One of the most fascinating aspects of the Woodland period is the development of mound building. The Hopewell culture was known for constructing large earthen mounds that served as burial grounds and ceremonial centers. These mounds were built by hand, and some of them, like the Serpent Mound, are incredibly intricate. The Hopewell people were also skilled traders, and they established extensive networks that extended beyond their own territory. They traded with other cultures throughout the eastern United States, and they were known for their distinctive pottery, which was decorated with intricate geometric patterns. Despite the achievements of the Hopewell culture, they eventually declined, and the reasons for their decline are still debated by historians. Some theories suggest that environmental factors such as deforestation or soil erosion may have played a role. Others believe that warfare or disease may have contributed to their decline. But overall, the Woodland period was a time of significant cultural and technological advancements for the indigenous peoples of the eastern United States. The introduction of agriculture. The bow and arrow and mound building had a lasting impact on these societies and their descendants, and they continue to be an important part of American history. As we wrap up our conversation about the Hopewell, let's shift gears a bit and talk about something really exciting. Speaking of ancient cultures and archaeological finds, if you haven't heard about the recent discovery of the lost city of El Dorado, then you're in for a treat. That's right. A team of archaeologists in Colombia recently stumbled upon this hidden gem, which dates back nearly 500 years. Imagine uncovering a secret that's been buried for centuries. Well, that's exactly what happened when this team unearthed the remnants of this once bustling city. It's like stepping back in time and witnessing history firsthand. But wait, there's more. The story gets even more intriguing. See, this wasn't just any ordinary city. No, sir. This was the legendary lost city of El Dorado, which is said to have been founded by the Spanish conquistadors in the 16th century. For centuries, its location had been a mystery, lost to time and shrouded in myths and legends. But now we have proof that it actually existed. It's like solving a puzzle that's been confounding explorers and historians for generations. And the excitement doesn't end there. If you want to be among the first to explore this hidden treasure, then you're in luck. Because we've got an exclusive opportunity for you. Right now, you can embark on a virtual journey to the lost city of El Dorado and immerse yourself in the wonders of this newly discovered gem. It's like being transported to another era and exploring a world that's untouched by modern times. So don't miss out on this incredible adventure. Take the chance to discover the secrets of the lost city of El Dorado and experience history in a whole new way. Click the link below and let the adventure begin. So, today we talked about the Hopewell culture and their amazing earthworks. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe and join our ever-growing community. And hey, if you have any suggestions for future videos, don't hesitate to drop them in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious and keep those mythological discussions going. Thanks for joining me today. Remember to stay curious. And until next time, goodbye. The Hopewell are an archaeological term referring to several Native American cultures who lived in the Ohio River Valley, roughly between the years 100 and 500 CE, who created large earthen works known as Hopewell mounds. In total, there are around 5,000 mounds across the Ohio River Valley, and the Hopewell people lived in these mounds. They conducted rituals in these mounds and they buried their dead in these mounds. There's been speculation that these mounds may have actually been cities because they're so vast, and archaeologists are still discovering the secrets hidden within these mounds. These people crafted beautiful artwork, buried them alongside their dead, and left them behind without any markings or names. These pieces of art are so well preserved that archaeologists are able to use them to reconstruct what life was like for the Hopewell people. The artwork also seems to indicate that they believed in an afterlife and that they felt a connection to the natural world around them. From the burial mounds to their artwork, the Hopewell people have left us a legacy that has endured for centuries. And tonight, we'll be exploring what lessons we can learn from the Hopewell and how their wisdom can help us navigate our modern world. Stay tuned because I think you're really gonna love this episode. Take a deep breath with me, in and out. Now imagine standing at the edge of a wide, ancient circle. No phones, no traffic, just trees, grass, sky, and time. That's where the Hopewell once stood. That's where they built, gathered, and dreamed. And though their mounds are quiet now, they're still whispering. Whispering something simple, but powerful. We had something to teach. Are you ready to listen? Tonight, we aren't going back in time. We're bringing the Hopewell forward into our world, our speed, our chaos. Because even though their world is long gone, their wisdom isn't. In fact, it might be exactly what we need right now. Lesson 1. Slow down. The Hopewell didn't build fast. They didn't rush their mounds. Didn't throw together ceremonies. Even their art, those tiny carved birds, the hand-cut mikawas made slowly, deliberately. They understood something modern life often forgets. Meaning takes time. We hurry everything now. Messages, meals, even memories. But the Hopewell remind us, when you slow down, you notice more. The way the sun shifts, the sound of birds at dawn, the feeling of clay under your fingers. The way silence speaks when you finally let it. You don't need a giant mound to practice this. You just need to pause. Take one thing today, just one, and do it slowly. Eat slowly, walk slowly, listen slowly, see what happens. Lesson 2. Honor the earth. To the Hopewell, the land wasn't a backdrop. It was alive. They didn't level mountains or drain rivers. They worked with nature, not against it. Their ceremonial sites weren't just plopped down wherever. They were placed carefully on ridges, near rivers, along lines that followed the stars. Their materials, clay, stone, copper, shell, came from the earth, and they used them respectfully, shaping only what they needed, always giving something back. In today's world, we forget sometimes, we pave, we dig, we throw away, but the Hopewell offer us a gentler way. Start small. Plant something. Pick up litter on your walk. Sit in a park and just feel the wind. No hashtags, no filters. Just a quiet thank you to the planet that holds you. Lesson 3. Build for the future. Hopewell mounds weren't for show. They were meant to last. They weren't made from steel or concrete, yet they've stood for over 2,000 years. Think about that. Meanwhile, some of our modern buildings crumble in 30. The Hopewell remind us, when you build something with care and purpose, it endures, whether it's a home, a tradition, a relationship. Ask yourself, am I building this just for today? Or for tomorrow too? Build things that future generations might thank you for even if they never know your name. Lesson 4. Value connection over conquest. The Hopewell culture wasn't driven by war or domination. Their power came from connection through trade, ceremony, shared symbols. They built networks, not empires. They welcomed people from far-off regions. Their artifacts came from as far as the Rockies, the Gulf Coast, and the Atlantic. And when they gathered, they shared knowledge, not weapons. In our world of constant comparison and competition, the Hopewell gently suggest, try cooperation. Make space for others. Listen to people different from you. Trade stories, not insults. Because at the end of the day, connection feels a whole lot better than conquest. Lesson 5. Let things go gracefully. The Hopewell culture didn't collapse with a scream. It faded like dusk turning to night, no dramatic wars. No last stands, just a quiet shift, new traditions, new paths. A gentle walking away from what no longer served them. And that's a lesson we rarely hear. It's okay to move on. Let go of old routines. Step back from things that no longer bring joy. Change direction if your soul feels pulled somewhere new. The Hopewell show us that not all endings are failures. Some are just transitions. Lesson 6. Leave beauty behind. The Hopewell could have just built shelters and tools. Instead, they shaped art. Pipes carved into animals. Copper beaten into shining symbols. Make a cut to look like birds and hands. Ceremonial objects buried in the ground, never meant to be seen again. Why? Because beauty has power. It connects us, moves us, heals us. So tonight, ask yourself, what beauty will you leave behind? A kind word? A painted wall? A song? A story? You don't have to be famous, you just have to create with heart. And now, my favorite part, leave your own lesson in the comments. What wisdom do you want to share with the world? And while you ponder that, here's a challenge. Write down one small change you can make tomorrow based on one of these lessons. Don't go big. Just one small step towards something more meaningful. And then share your written lesson with a friend. You can send this episode to them or share it on social media. Tag us and use the hashtag #WhoKnows. You might inspire someone else to take their own small step. And as you do that, let's close with this, a mantra inspired by the Hopewell. I listen deeply. I tread lightly. I build with care. I connect generously. I transition gracefully. I leave beauty behind. I am part of the earth, and the earth is part of me. And if you haven't already, subscribe to stay updated on all things. Thanks for listening, and remember, keep an open mind and a curious heart. Until next time, explore, dream, and wonder. We'll see you soon. Chapter 14. Walking the Mounds. A gentle tour of key sites. Let's go for a walk. No rush, no destination. Just you, the sound of your breath, and the ancient paths beneath your feet. Tonight, we are going to gently stroll through the sacred places left behind by the Hopewell, a quiet tour of the mounds. These aren't just piles of dirt. They're living memories, stitched into the land like whispers waiting to be heard. Put on your softest shoes or imagine bare feet if you like. The grass is cool, the wind is calm, and the past is all around you. Let's begin. Stop 1. Mound City Group. Chillicothe, Ohio, we start at Mound City, part of the Hopewell Culture National Historical Park. As you step into this wide, grassy field, you'll see neatly arranged mounds, about 24 of them. Each one rises gently from the earth, about head high or taller, in perfect spacing. There's a sense of quiet order here. Not military, not rigid, but ceremonial, purposeful. These were once burial mounds, but more than that, they were gathering places. Ritual spaces. Maybe even star maps. Walk slowly between them. You might feel the pull of something older than words. Pause at the largest one, nearly 17 feet tall. Imagine the hands that piled soil here, little by little, basket by basket, not to mark victory, but to mark memory. Sit on the edge if you like, close your eyes. You might hear footsteps from 2,000 years ago, or maybe just the wind, which is kind of the same thing. Stop 2. Seep Earthworks. Paint Valley, Ohio. Now we gently move to Seep Earthworks, nestled in a quiet countryside valley. This one feels different, more open, like a dream spread across a field. The site includes a massive circle connected to an enormous square. And although much of the original wall outlines are no longer standing, you can still feel the shape beneath your steps. Imagine standing in the center of the circle. The world is wide, the trees whisper, and above you, the sky stretches forever. They say this site may have been used for gatherings, maybe even ceremonies that aligned with moonrise or solstice events. If you stand at the right angle, you can picture the Hopewell gathered here, singing, dancing, sitting in silence, not a performance. A practice. And now you're part of it too. Stop 3. Hopewell Mound Group near Chillicothe, Ohio. Next, we wander to the Hopewell Mound Group, the site that gave the entire culture its name. This place was massive. Some of the earthworks here were among the largest the Hopewell ever built. Though many were damaged by plowing over the years, the core still remains. You're walking through a landscape that once buzzed with ceremony. There were massive mounds here, some used for burials, others perhaps for marking time or territory. The area once included a great rectangular enclosure the size of 125 football fields. That's a lot of grass, a lot of intention. Close your eyes. Imagine traders arriving from faraway places, fires burning at dusk, soft flute music drifting over the fields. This wasn't a forgotten place. It was a heartbeat of a civilization. And you're walking in its rhythm now. Stop 4. Newark Earthworks, Newark, Ohio. Now we shift east to Newark, home of one of the largest and most complex Hopewell earthwork systems ever discovered. Here you'll find huge geometric shapes, a perfect circle, a long connecting avenue, and a massive octagon so precise it makes modern engineers raise their eyebrows. Why an octagon? Turns out, it aligns perfectly with the 18.6-year lunar cycle. That means every 18 years or so, the moon rises right through one of the openings in the wall. Stand in the middle of the octagon, feel the symmetry, the openness. The sense that you're standing inside a calendar or maybe a telescope made of earth. Birds fly overhead. The breeze brushes your face. There's no rush. Just the slow rhythm of moonlight returning again and again, just like the people who once walked here. Stop 5. Fort Ancient, near Oregonia, Ohio. Let's climb a little now. High above the Little Miami River lies Fort Ancient, a site of long, curving earth walls that stretch for over 3.5 miles. Despite the name, it likely wasn't a fort at all. There's no sign of battle or weapons, just the quiet arc of walls and openings aligned with the solstices and maybe even sunrise points. This place feels like a sanctuary. Hike the ridge trail. Let your breath rise and fall with the hill. Look out over the forest. Imagine firelight flickering below. Hear a distant drumbeat echoing in the trees. This was a place to gather, not to guard. A place where the world felt bigger, and yet you belonged inside it. That's the gift of Fort Ancient. It reminds you, you don't have to understand everything to feel connected to it. Stop 6. Serpent Mound, Peebles, Ohio. We end our journey at the edge of a hill where the earth becomes a serpent. Serpent Mound, though not definitively Hopewell, it lives in the same tradition. A winding, coiling snake stretches over 1,300 feet, its open mouth aimed at the summer solstice sunset. Stand at its head, feel the quiet power of the shape, a symbol of rebirth, of celestial cycles, of the journey of life and death. No one really knows, but here's what matters. You're here. You're breathing. And you're part of a long, ancient moment that stretches beyond time. That's enough. As we end our walk, take one last breath of the ancient air. Feel the ground beneath your feet, the same ground they walked, built on, sang to. These sites aren't about the past. They're about presence. They're reminders that when we slow down, walk gently, and listen with our whole hearts, we're never really alone. Chapter 15. The Hopewell Legacy, a peaceful ending for a peaceful people, and now we come to the end. Not just the end of this story, but the end of a journey through time, across ancient fields and starlit ceremonies, alongside people who lived without walls or empires, but left behind something far greater. Tonight, we say goodnight to the Hopewell. But before we let them rest, let's sit down together, just you, me, and the hum of memory, and talk about what they left us. Because the Hopewell didn't disappear. They whispered their way forward, through soil, through stories, through the curve of a mound and the glint of copper in the grass. And what they left behind is a kind of legacy that doesn't need a museum. It lives in how we walk, how we listen, how we treat the land and one another. So what was their real gift? Peace. In a world that often remembers only war, the Hopewell gave us something else entirely. Their mounds weren't monuments to battle. They weren't fortresses. They weren't trophies. They were for gathering, for mourning, for celebrating life and the mystery of death, for aligning with the moon, not marching in conquest. In fact, what makes the Hopewell culture so special is what's missing. There's no evidence of war, no mass graves, no burned villages. Just earth, sky, ceremony, and a steady rhythm of people coming together, not to conquer, but to connect. Their trade networks? Peaceful. Their rituals? Communal. Their art? Spiritual. Their architecture? Made of dirt and intention, not meant to intimidate, but to align with the heavens. This was a culture that chose harmony, with the land, with the cosmos, with each other, and that might be their most important legacy of all. In a modern world that feels fast, loud, and often fractured, the Hopewell left behind a blueprint for something quieter, something gentler. So what can we take from them as we go back into our busy lives? Well, you can carry the Hopewell with you every time you pause to watch the moon rise, every time you walk in a circle just to clear your mind, every time you choose cooperation over control, or when you let something end gracefully without needing it to fall apart first. Their way of life was not about being remembered. It was about being in rhythm, with the land, with others, with themselves. Let's remember, too, that their story continues in the voices of today, in the tribes who honor them, in the elders who still sing their stories, in the children who visit mound sites with wonder in their eyes. The Hopewell didn't vanish. They just blended into the roots of the world like seeds waiting to bloom again when we're ready to listen. And if you ever find yourself near one of their sacred places, Mound City, Newark, Fort Ancient, or Serpent Mound, go gently. Take off your shoes if you can. Walk quietly. Don't ask too many questions. Just listen. Let your feet touch the earth. Let the wind pass over your shoulders. Let the silence do the talking. Because sometimes the best way to honor the past is simply to be present in it. So now, here at the close, I'll ask you to imagine one last scene. A warm evening, the stars are just starting to show. A slow drumbeat rises in the distance, steady, calm, familiar. A group gathers in a clearing. No one speaks loudly, no one shouts. They move in a circle. There is firelight, there is music, there is breath, and in that moment the past and the present aren't so different. They're both just people trying to understand the world, trying to honor life, trying to live with meaning. And you're part of that circle now. Because the Hopewell legacy doesn't need bloodlines or maps, it just needs hearts that listen, feet that walk gently, hands that build with care, and minds that remember that peace is possible because it already happened once. 2,000 years ago, right here, in the gentle hills, in the perfect circles, in the soft footsteps of a people who chose connection over conquest and left behind something beautiful, something that still hums in the grass, still glows under the moon, still waits for us to notice. So sleep well tonight, Sleep with the knowledge that the world has always had people like the Hopewell builders of peace, seekers of meaning, architects of stillness, and maybe, just maybe, you're one of them too.